So now we will discuss wind pollination or anemophily. So what are the characteristics of wind pollination? Flower must be unisexual. Okay. So if the flower is unisexual, then the pollen grain can be transferred through wind and can pollinate with the stigma of the another flower of another plant. The flower is colorless, odorless and nectarless, as there is no need to attract the wind, because wind is a abiotic agency. Color, odor and nectar is needed for the biotic agencies to attract the pollinators like insects and birds. So in wind pollination there is no need of color and odor or nectar to be present in flower. Anther and stigma are exposed outside of the flower. As you can see in this diagram, the anther and stigma are exposed outside of the flower so that they can easily, the pollen grain from the anther can be easily transferred from one place to another through wind, and any pollen grain can easily be deposited on the stigmatic surface of the flower if it is exposed outside of the flower. So the stigma mostly hairy, feathery, branched to catch the pollen. The stigma must have, for example, the stigma must have hairs like this, so that it can catch the pollen easily exposed outside of the flower, so it can catch the pollen easily. Okay. And branched, the stigma must be branched like this, so that more and more pollen can be catched by the stigma. These are the stigma. Okay. Pollen grain should be light, smooth, dry, so can be easily blown away. Okay, it should be light in weight, it should be smooth and it should be dry. Highly wasteful process, hence the large number of pollen it should be produced. This is the highly wasteful process, as the pollen has to be carried to a long distance with wind, so the large number of pollen is to be produced by anther. Wind pollination is non-directional and can travel over a long distance. Examples are coconut, palm, sugarcane, maize and numerous grasses. Okay. So now we are going to discuss water pollination or hydrophily. So characteristics of water pollination: it occur only in few aquatic plants. As the name suggests, water pollination, so it will occur in water in aquatic plants. It is of two types: hypohydrophily and epihydrophily. So in hypohydrophily, the pollination occur in totally submerged plant, and the pollen grains are produced and pollinate inside the water only. And in the epihydrophily, the pollination occur over the surface of the water. Okay, so the pollen grain in hypohydrophily, pollen grain float below the surface of the water and reaches to the stigma, which are coiled around the stigma and then germinates. In epihydrophily, the male flower releases to the surface. As you can see in this diagram, this is the male plant and this is the female plant. This is the female plant and this is the male plant, and the flowers of male plant are released on the surface of the water, and they get attached to the stigma of floating female flower. This is the floating female flower, This is the floating female flower, and they get attached to the stigma of a floating female flower. After they get attached, the stigma are pulled downwards with this coiled stalk, as you can see in this diagram, pulled downwards after the pollination, and hence further fertilization take place inside the water. Okay. So now we are going to discuss entomophily, which is insects pollination, and the characteristics are: insect visit flower for nectar. As you have seen, the bees collect nectar from the flower for the making of honey. So through which the pollens get attached to the surface, to their body, to their hairy body, and is transferred to the another flower when they goes to the another flower to collect nectar again. So in this way the pollination occur through bees. So other than bees, butterflies, wasps, beetles are other insect through which the pollination can occur. Flowers are bright in color and showy so that the insect can attract them easily. Produced odor which is pleasant to attract pollinators. Pollen grain are sticky. So in entomophily, the flower produce the sticky pollen grain so that they can stick to the hairy surface of insect. So that sticky substance is called pollen kit. Okay. So the next is ornithophily, bird pollination, and the characteristics of bird pollination is: the bird should be of small size and of long beak. For example, hummingbird and sunbird. So bird derive nectar from the flower composed of sugar. Hummingbird can take half of its body weight of sugar. So flower are mostly of funnel shape like this. This is the funnel shaped flower. So that the bird can insert its beak inside the flower and can collect the nectar easily. Flowers are mostly red, yellow, orange or blue color, which attract the birds most. Bird pollinated are bombax and erythrina. Over 100 species of Australian plant are ornithophilous flower. So bird pollination mostly occur in Australian plant. Okay. Now the next is Chiropterophily, bat pollination. So the pollination occur through bat, in which the transfer of pollen grain can be done over a long distance, that is up to 30 km. Flower emits strong odor and having abundant amount of nectar. Flower have large number of stamen to produce large quantity of pollens. So when the bat come to the flower for nectar, so all the pollen grain stick to its surface, its hairy surface, and is transferred to another flower when the bat collect nectar from another flower. Okay. So now we are going to discuss importance of cross pollination. First of all, advantages: bring genetic recombination and variation in offspring. As in cross pollination, two different plants are needed for cross pollination. So in this way the genetic recombination and variation in offspring occur. It increases the adaptability and make it more fitted to the change in environment. Add the defective characters to the race are replaced. If there is any defective character present in a same flower, so it can be replaced as the pollination occur between the two different plants, so the new characters are involved, and they will replace the present character of the flower. Seeds produced are much better and healthy. Disadvantage are the good characters of a race are likely to be lost, and it is a highly wasteful process as the plant has to produce large number of pollens. Now we are going to discuss the next topic, which is artificial hybridization. So artificial hybridization is the hybridization done by the man. Okay, so it is a man-made process. It is a In artificial hybridization, stigma is protected from the contamination from unwanted pollen. So how the stigma is protected from the contamination of unwanted pollen? So this is done by two processes: emasculation and bagging technique. So in bisexual flower, the removal of anther before the anther is split to release pollen using forceps. This step is referred to as emasculation. As you can see in this diagram, with the help of a forceps, the anther is removed from the flower before it is split and release the pollen into the atmosphere. After emasculation, flower is covered with the bag, generally made up of butter paper, to prevent contamination of its stigma with unwanted pollen. This process is done by bagging. Okay, as you can see in this diagram, the bag is used, which is made up of butter paper, to cover the emasculated flower to prevent it from the contamination of unwanted pollen. Okay, when the stigma of bagged flower get matured and attain receptivity, a mature pollen grain from the anther is dusted on the stigma and the flower are rebagged until the fruit is allowed to develop. Okay, thank you for watching this video. Subscribe Exam Hai on YouTube, like our video and comment.